This short training video is about the words up early, key message, quiet time to talk. We're going to talk about why it's important for early communication and how we can use it when we're supporting children's communication and language development. The words up early, key message, quiet time to talk is a key message that's really about the environment that we're interacting with children in. It's thinking about what's happening in the environment around us that's interfering with how children are hearing language. Children benefit from a quiet time to talk when we're interacting with them that enables them to hear and tune in to the language that we're using and enables them to hear that language and pick up on it and be able to listen to and understand and learn from the language that we're using. When we think about the environment and what's happening in the environment, there's often quite a lot of noises and things that we might not be tuning into because we've learned as adults to tune out from that language. So I want you to just take a minute while you're listening to this, just now think about what can you hear in the background? Is there music on in the background just now? Is the washing machine running? Is the dishwasher running? Is there an air conditioning unit running that you can hear? Is there a fan? Is there a beep from a mobile phone? Or can you even hear the computer fan running just now? I mean, there might be lots of noises that are going on that you're not sure, that you weren't really listening to, but now that I've pointed them out, you probably are really aware of. Sorry about that. There are often lots of noises in our environment that are on in the background that we are really actually quite good at tuning out to because we've learnt that it's the language that's important and we've learnt to tune out those other noises and tune into language. But actually for our children, that's more difficult. They haven't quite learnt yet that it's the language that they need to tune into. And the noises within our environment make it more difficult for them to tune into language. So quiet time to talk is about us as the adults to trying to think about the environment and make it easier for our children to tune into language. If we think about when we're driving a car, for those of us that are driving, if we have a sat nav, sometimes we'll have the radio on in the car, kids in the back, all of that noise going on all at the same time, and we might have the sat nav on low, just kind of there, and we might be driving around our hometown, absolutely fine. We're listening to the sat nav because we know roughly where we're going. So sometimes we know roughly where we're going, but we've just got that sat nav on just as a safety check to know where we're going. And that's fine. It's all well and good. We can cope with the kids of the noise of the kids and the noise of the radio all at the same time. That's all okay. And yet, when we suddenly go somewhere else that we don't know, we're in an unfamiliar city and we need to get to a place, there's lots of one-way systems that we don't know, and suddenly it becomes a little bit more tricky and we really need to tune into that sat nav. What we do is we turn the radio down and we shush the children in the back if possible. And we really focus in on that one thing. And we tune out all that other noise. And it's a bit like that. So what we want to do for our children is we want them to tune into our voice when we're trying to support them to learn language. We want them to learn the language from us. And we want them to think of us as almost that sat nav. So we want to reduce all the background noise and we want to tune up the language from us in the way that we tune up the sat nav and reduce the radio and everything else. And it's thinking about it in a way like that. In a busy household or an early years setting, it can be really difficult to find quiet times to talk. And we just need to start to have a wee think about that. We know that children's language develops as they grow and develop, and it extends as they develop. So we know in the early years they go from not having language, they're using non-verbal means of communication, and they develop throughout the early years until they're using sentences. And roughly speaking, it's typical for children to develop attention as well as their language develops. And roughly speaking, it goes from kind of a minute for every year of their lives. So, we're expecting a 3-year-old really only to attend to things for about 3 minutes, or a 2-year-old for only about 2 minutes. And we can extend that by some of the things that we do. So, we can extend it by changing the way that we interact and adapting the environment. But actually, if we think about a typical toddler at home or an early years setting, actually, if you watch them, they do flit around. They do move from one activity to another, and actually only settling to some things for a really short space of time. And it can actually be exhausting to kind of try and keep up with them as they move from one thing to another. And that's typical development. They should actually only have that really short attention span at that age. Um, so when we're thinking about a quiet time to talk, what we're actually thinking is how we can support them to develop their attention and listening skills. And creating a quiet time to talk can actually help children to focus their attention and listening. And actually, having a lot of noise and background noise can be distracting and can impact on their attention and listening skills too. What we might also need to consider are other distractions in the environment as well. It might not just be about noise distractions, it might be about visual distractions. Sometimes children find it difficult to focus their attention when there are too many toys out. So if you've got a really busy room with lots of things out, you might find that a wee one finds it much more difficult to settle to one activity, because actually, well, I'm looking at this, but actually, what's over here and what's over here. And sometimes even as adults, we find it more difficult to settle when there's more things out. I actually cleared my desk before sitting down to kind of write this presentation, because I was like, oh, actually, I just need to clear my workspace to do that, because even having lots of things out is distracting for us. And sometimes children will find in an early years setting it's more distracting to have story time in the story corner of the nursery, because actually it might prove too much of a distraction having that lovely open bookshelf that's got all those tempting books to look at there. And that's why they're there, isn't it? It's there to invite them to look at them. But it might just prove too much of a distraction if they're too much of a distraction away from the storyteller if they're there. So absolutely, if you think back to that sat-nav example we talked about on the last slide, think how much easier it was to focus your attention on the instructions, or that activity in hand, once the other distractions, such as the radio, was removed. So if we're thinking about measuring our own ability to pay attention to how much longer we will be able to attend once the environment is adapted, when we have a quiet time to talk, it's much easier for children to focus their attention once distractions have been removed. So adapting the environment and thinking about a quiet time to talk is all about supporting children's listening and attention too. So when we're talking about reducing distractions, we're clearly not thinking that we have to reduce the distractions all of the time. That's impossible to do in a busy household. It's impossible to do in a busy nursery. But what we're thinking about is, let's have a think about when can we find quieter times in the day? When can we find those quiet times to talk? And that's an easier way to think about it. Let's think about, when are those times when we can use quieter times to talk to really focus on language learning and focus on those language learning interactions that are going to support our children's language learning. So in the home, this might be when older siblings are at school, younger siblings are having a nap. It might be at bath time when things are generally quieter, or it might be that there's just a quieter time in the day when the pace is a little slower. And you'll naturally know when those quieter times are and when it fits in with family life. It will be different from family to family. In an early years setting, it might be about thinking, when is the best time in the nursery day to have listening activities such as story, song and rhyme time, and circle time. Those are those times when it's really key listening times and really key kind of listening and language learning activities. So sometimes they're noisier than others, so such as particular pickup times. are really busy, when that doorbell is a frequent interruption, or there's particular times when the dishwasher may be running, so just after snack or lunchtime, and those are going to be particularly noisy times. And so we need to plan when we are going to have those language learning, listening opportunities within the nursery and nursery day. We can also use times when we're out and about or within the nursery or within the home to play games that involve listening. So this is a really simple activity. If you click on the link and have a watch of this video, where you can just draw children's attention to sounds that they hear when they're out and about. And it's a really good activity for building attention and listening skills, and just listening to sounds when you're out and about and talking about them. So it works on language and attention and listening. It's a lovely activity to try. So to summarize, the Words Up key message, Quiet Time to Talk, is really about the environment. It's thinking about the distractions, both auditory, so like noise, and visual, and anything else that might be distracting in the environment. So take some time over the next week or so to think about what is distracting for your child in the environment, or for the children in the early years setting in the environment. Think about when are the best times for your child in the day when you can have language learning opportunities. Think about what can be adapted. There'll be times that can't, but think about other things that can be adapted. Can I create quiet times to talk? And think about when's the best opportunities for you and your children during the week. Please watch the other Words Up Early key message videos for further information. You can also contact your local speech and language therapy department for further information and advice. And there's also the Just Ask inquiry line on a Tuesday afternoon for any queries about child development.